The emperor's eyes had been open for 3 days, staring into emptiness, while flies swarmed the corners. In the marble halls of the villa, servants crept silently, each terrified of confirming what the smell already revealed. Outside, beyond Capri's cliffs, a distant sound began, faint at first, like waves against rocks, growing louder with every passing hour. Words emerged from the roar, Tiber to Tiberius. The chant spread from Rome's streets to every corner of the empire. In death, the man who had terrorized millions for 23 years was reduced to what he had always been, rotting flesh. Servants found him twisted in his sheets, face locked in a final grimace. The pustules covering his body now wept their last. No tears were shed for Tiberius, only celebration that the nightmare had finally ended. How did a celebrated general, once offered supreme power, descend into a creature so vile that Romans invented new words for his crimes? To understand how evil wore the purple, we must return to a wedding day that began in tears. Tiberius pressed his face against the garden wall, watching his ex-wife walk by with her new husband. For the last time in his life, witnesses saw him cry. The year was 12 BC, and Rome's most promising general had just lost the only person who had ever truly loved him. Vipania hadn't wanted the divorce, neither had Tiberius. But Augustus commanded, and when the first emperor commanded, even love had to die. The marriage to Vipania had been Tiberius's anchor to humanity. She understood his awkward silences, his preference for military camps over palace halls. Together, they had built something rare among Roman nobles, genuine affection. Their son, Drusus, was proof that even the grim Tiberius could create joy. But Augustus had plans that required sacrifice. Political alliances were necessary. His daughter Julia needed a new husband after Agrippa's death. The solution was simple: force Tiberius to divorce his beloved wife and marry into direct imperial blood. The orders came cloaked in duty and destiny. Tiberius resisted, until resistance itself became treason. Divorce proceedings moved with brutal efficiency. One day Vipania was his wife. The next she belonged to another senator. Roman law was precise that way. Roman hearts, far messier. Servants reported seeing Tiberius lurking outside Vipania's new home at odd hours. Once, he followed her through the forum, keeping distance but never losing sight. When she finally noticed him, witnesses said she ran. He stood frozen, watching her vanish into the crowd. The wedding night set a pattern of cruelty. Julia was everything Vipania was not. Sharp where Vipania had been gentle, cruel where she had been kind. She had been forced into the marriage as well, but unlike Tiberius, she chose revenge over grief. Their wedding night became a battlefield. She mocked his stammering attempts at intimacy. He answered with silence, growing darker with each passing day. The marriage bed became a nightly theater of humiliation. Julia took lovers openly, ensuring Tiberius knew every detail. She returned from affairs wearing other men's gifts, describing their superiority in intimate matters. Tiberius endured, but inside, something began to twist. Servants noticed the first changes. Where once he had been merely stern, he now became unpredictable. A slave who spilled wine might receive forgiveness, or 50 lashes. The punishment depended on whether Tiberius had seen Vipania that day. His famed self-control cracked, revealing something sharp beneath. Military dispatches from this period describe a commander growing brutal. Enemies who once received honorable deaths now faced inventive punishments. A German chieftain who surrendered expecting mercy was forced to watch his family executed before his own death. The general who had inspired loyalty through fairness now ruled through fear. Yet this was only the first soul Tiberius would lose. The transformation deepened with each month. He began drinking heavily, something the abstinent soldier had never done. Wine made the nights with Julia bearable, but brought darker thoughts. He began keeping lists, recording anyone who had wronged him, real or imagined, with disturbing precision. Physical cruelty entered the marriage, not explosive, attention-grabbing violence, but calculated torments. Julia's slaves whispered of punishments for minor errors. A hairdresser who pulled too hard had fingers broken one by one. A cupbearer who poured wine too slowly had to stand holding full jugs until exhaustion, then was beaten for spilling. Through it all, Tiberius continued his vigils outside Vipania's home. The new husband complained to magistrates, but who would arrest the emperor's son-in-law? The stalking continued, proving that power could take everything except obsession. Losing love left a wound. Losing blood poured poison into it. Death was already riding toward his son. The messenger's words hit like a physical blow. "Your son is dead, Caesar." Physicians suspected poison. Drusus, the only good thing to emerge from Tiberius's marriage to Julia, had died. Young, charismatic, everything Tiberius was not. At 23, he commanded legions with ease. At 23, he died writhing, organs failing. The death mask captured a twisted mouth, bulging eyes. Poison was certain. The killer remained unknown. Tiberius's grief became instant rage. If Vipania had been his anchor, Drusus had been his last thread of sanity. That thread snapped. The death mask revealed something worse than murder. Physicians examined the body in alarm. This was no common poison. The effects were precise, cruel, deliberate. Someone with expertise had designed Drusus's death to maximize suffering, to let him know he was dying, to think about it. Tiberius absorbed it in silence. Witnesses said his face never changed, but his hands clenched so tightly blood dripped from his palms. Finally, he spoke calm. "Bring me everyone who had access to my son's food and drink." The investigation began that night. Not measured Roman justice, but something older, darker. Tiberius personally interrogated each suspect. Questions started reasonable, movements, alibis, motives, but soon turned strange. He demanded to know dreams, childhood fears, beliefs in afterlife punishments. His suspect list grew daily, written in his own hand. The wine steward who served Drusus's last meal, the physician who failed him, a senator who quarreled over grain, Drusus's freedwoman near the kitchens. The list expanded beyond reason. Anyone who benefited from Drusus's death, opposed him, or had simply been present. Tiberius created categories: certain guilt, probable guilt, possible guilt, guilt by association. Executions began with the first, but did not end there. Roman law demanded evidence, grief demanded blood, and Tiberius had discovered which need was stronger. The wine steward died first, crucifixion modified. Tiberius ordered the crossbeam lowered, so his toes barely touched the ground, prolonging agony for days. The physician received poison, diluted to replicate Drusus's slow death. Each execution was tailored, personalized, a signature of vengeance. What he did to the physician's family became a template. The physician had a wife and 3 children. Roman law said families weren't responsible for individual crimes. Tiberius found creative interpretations. The wife was charged with failing to report suspicious behavior, a capital offense. The eldest son, barely 16, accused of conspiracy by silence. The younger 2 presented a legal problem. Roman law forbade executing children under puberty. Tiberius consulted obscure precedents, finding the notion of corruption of blood, that treason poisoned entire lineages. He ordered the children held until adulthood, then executed for inherited guilt. Waiting proved intolerable. Each day they lived felt like mockery of Drusus's death. Tiberius devised a solution. If they could not be executed as children, he would declare them adults, then have them strangled the same day. The pattern was set. Future victims learned Tiberius's revenge extended beyond the individual to everyone they loved. Guilt by blood, marriage, friendship, proximity. The empire watched in horror as grief metastasized into systematic cruelty. Within months, Tiberius made a decision that would turn the empire into a prison. He would leave Rome forever. The architect's hands trembled as Tiberius explained his 12 villas. Capri had been chosen with disturbing care, an island fortress accessible only by sea, cliffs plunging into deep water. No surprises could reach him. No assassins could approach unseen. No witnesses could easily escape. Kellers, an Assyrian who had built palaces across the empire, had never encountered specifications like these. 12 villas, each with a distinct purpose. Hidden passages, rooms with floor drains, pools of precise depths with viewing platforms above, ceiling hooks and wall restraints. "I require privacy," Tiberius said, half hidden in shadow. "Complete privacy." Villa 3 featured pools unlike any in Rome, not for swimming, but precise depths that kept adults afloat, visible from above. Heated water, underwater seating at calculated heights. Killers asked no questions. Curiosity around Tiberius led to disappearance. Workers were recruited across the empire, so no one group knew the full plan. Once sections were completed, they were sent away. Other villas had separate purposes. Villa 7 contained soundproof chambers. Villa 9 had extensive medical facilities, restraint-equipped examination tables, surgical tools, fluid containers. Ships arrived at night, their cargo silent. The first vessels brought supplies and servants. The servants were unusual, young, attractive, chosen for qualities beyond household skills. They came from distant provinces, where Latin was barely spoken, families unlikely to question children who vanished. Later shipments brought moving bundles, crates with air holes. Guards accompanied all, veterans of German campaigns, trained to obey without question. Construction took 2 years. By completion, Capri had become a self-contained world, answerable only to Tiberius. Supply lines were established, provisions arrived weekly. What left the island was correspondence, imperial edicts growing stranger and crueler each month. Architecture was only the beginning of his innovation. Tiberius assembled a court unlike any Rome had ever seen. Where other emperors surrounded themselves with advisors and administrators, he sought specialized expertise. Caracals, a physician expelled for unnatural experiments. Nerva, a legal scholar who mastered loopholes and protective laws. Acelius, former head of the empire's most exclusive brothel, forced underground for extreme practices. These men became Tiberius's inner circle, each contributing knowledge to the emperor's evolving obsessions. They dined together nightly, discussing philosophy and depravity with equal rigor. Visitors described the atmosphere as scholarly corruption, where unspeakable acts were debated with the same detachment as grain imports. Others drawn to darkness arrived. Shunned nobles with appetites, merchants trading in specific types of slaves, artists capturing moments of human extremity. Capri became a magnet for the empire's worst impulses, all shielded by imperial authority. When the first screams echoed across the cliffs, even guards hardened by Germania's wars learned they had seen nothing yet. Job postings for the palace were unlike any in Rome, seeking swimming instructors for imperial pools, children preferred. Recruitment happened quietly in the poorest districts. Families with too many mouths were approached by well-dressed intermediaries. The offer seemed generous. Children would learn skills, send money home. Parents who asked too many questions found the offers withdrawn. Those who agreed never saw their children again. The selected children, mostly 6 to 10, were transported to Capri in covered wagons and closed ships. Confused but awed, many had never seen the sea or such luxury. Marble halls and laden tables seemed dreamlike. Training began with swimming, initially playful. Pools became places of learning and discipline. Children learned to hold their breath, glide beneath the surface, swim between adult legs without breaking rhythm. Quick learners received rewards, sweet treats, soft beds, promises of future wealth. Gradually, lessons became precise. Children practiced nibbling gently, first on fruit, then on each other under supervision. Those who bit too hard or hesitated were punished. They were called minnows. Like tiny fish, they learned to move together, responding to gestures signaling approach or retreat, developing glances and touches to warn of danger or opportunity. Parents who inquired heard only silence. Letters stopped after a month. Official replies were vague. Contact disrupted adjustment. Persistent parents faced other troubles: higher taxes, revoked licenses, and sometimes disappearance. Remaining families learned to grieve quietly, speak of their children in past tense. On Capri, the children's transformation continued with machine-like precision. They were given new names, sea creatures, erasing their pasts. Dormitories attached to pool complexes dictated every hour. One boy, Octopus, formerly Marquis of Bundisium, tried to escape by diving deep. He did not know the pools were designed to prevent escape. Apparent exits were visual tricks. Hours later, they found him, lungs full of water, clawing at solid stone he believed was freedom. Tiberius ordered his body displayed to teach the minnows one lesson. There was no escape but through submission. Even death required permission. Psychological conditioning intensified. Children were taught their families had sold them. The outside world rejected them, and only Tiberius's mercy kept worse fates at bay. They competed for approval, reported doubts. Pools were only one venue for horror. Fear became a weapon across the empire. Marcus Calvus, poor yesterday, owned a neighbor's villa today after whispering 5 words to a magistrate. He cursed the emperor's name. Truth mattered little. Accusation alone sufficed. Speaking against the emperor was treason. Hearing treason without reporting was complicity. Suspecting treason without investigating was negligence. The empire became a web of potential guilt. The delator system spread rapidly. Informers emerged, bankrupt merchants, freed men craving citizenship, senators eliminating rivals. Information became currency more valuable than gold. Everyone had something to sell. Marcus Calvus typified the new breed, a failed pottery merchant who remembered conversations, twisted innocent words into treasonous meanings. His first success, reporting a customer's complaint about taxes as sedition. The customer's execution brought Marcus a cut of confiscated property. Formula: accusation plus execution equals profit. Publicly posted rules. Informers received 1/4 of estates, the imperial treasury another, and the remaining half funded public works. Competition among delators grew fierce. Simple accusations no longer sufficed. Evidence was fabricated, conversations invented, documents forged. Actors were hired to extract compromising statements. Specialization emerged. One read dreams for treasonous prophecies. Another analyzed faces during imperial readings. A third claimed to detect thoughts through pulse. Absurdity mattered less than results, and results meant executions. Children memorized dinner conversations, reporting unusual words. Schools taught loyalty lessons, practicing identifying treasonous statements. Families shattered. Brothers denounced brothers over inheritances. Wives accused husbands to escape marriages. Children testified against parents for discipline. Trust vanished. Friendships crumbled. Even thoughts felt dangerous. Some accusations required physical proof. Letters were forged with criminal precision. Meetings staged with doubles and disguises. Objects planted to suggest conspiracy. Rusted swords, foreign coins, lists of names. Delator Fulcinius perfected retroactive treason. He accused the recently deceased of lifetime conspiracies. The dead could not defend themselves. Estates were forfeit. Families lost everything to ghostly accusations. Terror became self-perpetuating. Accusations brought executions, which brought property, attracting more informers. Tiberius encouraged it, seeing perfect governance. The empire policing itself while funding operations through confiscation. When law itself became torture, magistrates discovered execution as an art starting long before death. The scribe recorded new procedures. Virgin executions required preliminary action to comply with law. Roman law, rooted in religion, forbade executing virgins. For a ruler eliminating entire bloodlines, this was unacceptable. During Caesar's prosecution, his 12-year-old daughter was condemned for his treason. Magistrates balked. Tiberius's advisors cited military law. Enemies of Rome forfeited all protections. The executioner was instructed. Her virginity had to be eliminated before strangling. The law was satisfied through atrocity. Compliance achieved by acts mocking justice itself. Tiberius's scholars closed every loophole. Age limits reinterpreted. If someone could walk and speak, they could commit treason. Mental capacity exemptions vanished. Madness became evidence of divine punishment. Guilt by association expanded. Slaves executed for masters' crimes. Dinner guests condemned for failing to report treasonous talk. Physicians punished for treating accused traitors. Constructive treason emerged. Innocent acts seen as potentially seditious. Astrologers predicting imperial deaths. Historians writing past tyrannies, executed. Magistrates competed for creativity. Judge Vibius Serenus pioneered preventive execution, killing potential criminals. Judge Cotomelinus developed inherited intent. Children bore not just parents' guilt but motivations. Torture became standard for witnesses. Confess quickly, suspected of lies, resist, guilty of concealment. Every response justified escalation. Legal proceedings became theater. Accusers hired actors to dramatize charges. Evidence was presented in ascending horror, ensuring verdicts. Defenders, when allowed, faced execution for defending clients too well. One judge's innovation would haunt families for generations. Judge Macro introduced sequential justice. Family members executed in order of emotional closeness. Distant relatives died first, their deaths pressuring closer kin into confessions. Parents watched children perish to protect spouses, only to be executed afterward, for the original crime plus the crime of letting relatives die in their place. Imperial archives preserved these proceedings, manuals of sadism wrapped in legal language. Every innovation was carefully documented, creating precedent for future use. What began as exceptional measures became standard practice, encoded in law to outlast the emperor. The bureaucratization of cruelty demanded vast machinery. Clerks specialized in tracking bloodlines, so no relation escaped. Archives detailed who dined with whom, marriages, cousin business connections. The information network behind legal atrocities became more sophisticated than any modern surveillance state. But physical tortures were not the worst. Tiberius had learned to murder hope itself, weaponizing mercy with unmatched cruelty. Prisoners collapsed with relief when reprieve was announced, unaware it was the prelude to deeper torment. Lucius Auronius had spent 6 months in the Mamertine prison, awaiting execution for imagined conspiracies. The darkness of his cell had become familiar. Rats almost companions compared to human visitors. Guards announced Tiberius's clemency. Charges dropped, freedom granted. Lucius wept with joy, sunlight painfully bright after months underground. His wife collapsed at the door, children clinging to his legs. For 3 perfect days, life resumed. On the 4th morning, soldiers returned. New evidence had emerged. Clemency revoked. Screams echoed. The familiar song of Tiberius's cruel games. 3 days of freedom were worth more pain than 3 years of prison. Psychological torture of false mercy exceeded physical suffering through precision. Prisoners were studied to determine their deepest attachments. Family, favorite foods, sunlight. Reprieves were crafted to restore these, then snatched away. Some prisoners endured multiple cycles. Senator Gacilius, record holder, was freed and rearrested 7 times over 2 years. Each release long enough to instill hope, too brief to heal. His final execution was relief, even to himself. The system's cruelty thrived on unpredictability. Reprieves lasted hours or months, leaving prisoners trapped in perpetual emotional twilight. Some begged for death rather than face another cycle. Marcus Lepidus attempted suicide. Guards cut him down, nursed him, then announced his next temporary freedom. He spent it catatonic, awaiting inevitable reversal. When it came, witnesses said he smiled for the first time in years. Reprieves destroyed families as effectively as executions. Wives unmourned husbands only to mourn again. Children feared attachment. Emotional whiplash created generational trauma. Conditional reprieves added further torment. Your freedom depends on your brother's confession. You live as long as your son remains loyal. Prisoners became unwilling agents of their own suffering. The system was so efficient that other emperors took notes. Tiberius documented methods with disturbing pride. Letters to governors explained timing for maximum psychological impact. Charts tracked emotional breaking points across personality types. The science of false mercy became another Roman innovation. Some prisoners developed immunity through madness, greeting reprieves and rearists with indifference. These broken souls frustrated Tiberius, whose suffering required awareness. He ordered physicians to maintain sanity, preserving capacity for pain. False mercy created its own economy. Families paid fortunes for reprieve schedules. Guards sold hints. Black markets emerged for emotional preparation. Philosophers taught techniques to survive hope's murder. Physicians prescribed herbs to numb anticipation. Minds shattered across the empire, and Tiberius's own body began reflecting inner rot. Mirrors became his enemies. Physicians recoiled as pustules burst under touch. His face wept pus that no ointment could stop. Physical decay began subtly. Persistent rash, occasional boils, unhealing skin. Court physicians initially blamed diet, stress, humid island air. Treatments for normal men failed. By 70, corruption was undeniable. Open sores covered face and scalp, weeping despite intervention. The smell preceded him through villas, perfumed attempts failing. Servants breathed through mouths. The irony, a man declaring himself God decomposed alive. Priests struggled not to vomit during ceremonies. Imperial propaganda clashed grotesquely with physical reality. As his body failed, Tiberius perfected ever more elaborate tortures. Severe flare-ups coincided with executions. Physicians tracked eruptions like weather patterns. He banned mirrors after catching his reflection. Truth too clear. Augustus's successor reduced to walking pestilence. Servants glimpsing him often disappeared. Staff developed protocols. Walking backward when serving. Eyes fixed on floors. Hoods limiting vision. Even accidental glimpses carried risk. One maid gasped and was strangled within hours. Paranoia extended beyond vanity. Accurate portraits could allegedly carry magical attacks. Artists forbidden. Coins preserved decades-old profiles. Rome was ruled by a phantom of past glory, while present horrors went unrecorded. Physical suffering fueled cruelty. Unable to sleep from pain, he ordered entertainment through others' agony. Night executions became common, screams drowning his groans. He experimented with suffering as medicine, studying whether human pain eased his own. Gardens wilted in his presence. The sea breeze seemed to intensify corruption. Attempts at concealment grew desperate. Incense and perfumes burned eyes and throats. Courtiers developed ailments mirroring his decay, rashes, boils, wasting diseases. Proximity to corruption carried visible cost. Even as his body failed, Tiberius perfected one final innovation, turning Capri's cliffs into execution grounds. At the cliff's base, soldiers thought duty simple until the first body crashed. Centurion Marcus Flavius, veteran of 20 years, had expected retirement, not horror. The location, sheer 300-foot drop onto jagged rocks, deep water beyond. No trial, no ceremony, just gravity. Marcus's duty, ensure no one survived, finishing those still breathing. Victims sometimes jump before being pushed. Guards learn body language, restraining desperate attempts to control final moments. Even the choice of death was denied. Forced marches became ceremonies of terror. Victims walked slowly, contemplating the approaching edge. Some were deceived until the last step, others knew immediately. Families executed together. Children watched parents fall. Husbands watched wives. Psychological multiplication of suffering was intentional. Rocks below stained red. Tides could not cleanse. Fishermen avoided waters, claiming nets tangled with horrors. Birds feeding there considered cursed. Marcus initially tallied bodies on his shield. After hundreds, he stopped counting but could not forget. Faces haunted him. Smiling young woman, cursing old man, child calling for mother. Eventually, Marcus joined his own tally in death. Cliff duty rotated monthly. Even a month proved too long. Veterans of brutal campaigns broke under civilian executions. Passive killing, just waiting for gravity, exceeded active combat's horror. After 23 years, Romans began praying for what they had never wanted, the emperor's death. Hushed whispers asked, "Is the monster finally dying?" By 36 AD, rumors of illness became entertainment. Markets reacted to health reports. Grain prices dropped if he seemed weak, rose if he recovered. Temples saw offerings to gods of death, cursed tablets scratched with pleas for imperial demise. Hatred had to be coded, walls had ears. Failed assassination attempts triggered purges. Celebrating survival became mandatory. Then came March 37 AD. Silence from Capri was real. Supply ships returned without orders, messages unanswered. The clockwork of administration halted. Days passed in suspense. Funeral preparations in Rome hinted at death before official announcement. Hope became possibility. Possibility became probability. On March 16th, a servant approached the emperor's chamber. The smell hit first, corruption beneath perfume. Tiberius lay twisted in silk, eyes fixed on a ceiling only he could see. Flies crawling over unblinking orbs. Face a mass of pus, sheets soaked. a corpse yet somehow living in memory. Word spread like wildfire. Servants stepped into sunlight. Guards set down weapons. Pools drained, evil seeming flushable. Mainland eyes saw signal fires. Whispers, the emperor is dead. Suppressed emotions erupted. 23 years of terror released simultaneously. Poor quarters, markets, forums sang with relief. Senators discovered courage. Citizens forgave informers. Wine flowed, forbidden songs played, dancers filled streets. Joy existed, but children did not understand it. Adults flinched. 2 decades of conditioning could not be undone by a corpse. Officials debated burial, state funeral, or treatment like a common criminal. The debate raged as the body rotted. Meanwhile, Capri revealed darker truths. Pools disgorged small bones. Hidden rooms revealed specialized instruments. Archives listed victims spanning decades. Survivors emerged, former minnows, women kept for unspeakable purposes. Each story added horror to Tiberius's legacy. The legal system faced impossible questions. How to prosecute the dead, compensate victims, dismantle machinery without becoming machinery itself. Institutions bore corruption's fingerprints. Law books contained his precedents. Pragmatism prevailed. Minimal rights. Ashes interred quietly. Tiber undisturbed. The minnows were freed but never free. Families reunited with ghosts of children lost. Informers reinvented themselves. The architecture of terror remained in Roman law. Capri was abandoned, villas crumbling, island whispered cursed. History remembered Tiberius as the emperor who perverted power into unimaginable patterns. Greater horror. Rome adapted. Atrocity became routine. Evil did not die with him, merely lost its most enthusiastic practitioner. Future emperors studied his methods, some in revulsion, others in interest. Legal torture, systematic terror, industrialized cruelty echoed through centuries. Rome learned what was possible when power met pathology. In the dying light of March 16th, Rome faced an uncomfortable truth. Survival had required adaptations that could not be abandoned. Freedom tasted different after decades of fear. Tiber flowed on, carrying daily life as always. No dramatic cleansing. Evil's end was quiet. Somewhere, a young Caligula took notes, learning from past successes and failures. The monster was dead, but monstrosity had proven viable. The servant who discovered the corpse never spoke of the dead eyes. Most agreed on emptiness. Perhaps that was Tiberius's final punishment, alone, forced to witness himself without mirrors or mercy.